Beach FM, locals talking to locals.
Rob McCann, a very good morning and welcome to you.
Good morning, sir.
Lovely to talk to you. Rob McCann, of course, Kapiti Coast District Councillor, and he's got actually a couple of hot portfolios at the moment, social welfare. We could talk about it at great length, but I'd like to concentrate on the housing portfolio because I saw to my delight that in the agenda for Thursday's meeting, page 92 is where we begin discussing housing. And Rob, I know there's a general perception in the community that not much has been happening in the housing area as it relates to the KCDC. I imagine you're going to tell me that's not quite the case.
Well, I can't speak for the past, but I was very lucky enough to ask for the housing portfolio, and the Mayor kindly gave that to me, and that's an area that I'm just absolutely passionate about. I mean, the one thing that we're facing is COVID-19 right at the moment, yes. And that's scary enough for people who've got homes, who've got roofs over their heads. So you can imagine if you're on a couch somewhere or you're in a garage and you're in crowded conditions, that type of thing really ramps up anxiety. So it's a good reminder for us that housing is absolutely necessary at the best of times, and right now as we're facing challenging times, even more necessary. So what's happened is that over a long period of time, the council have moved from a position where we had an advocacy role, that was what they thought it was, and providing housing for our seniors, to recognising that housing is something that we need to do far more about and being proactive in that space. So the Mayor, as you know, set up a group of people who went out and advocated for housing within New Zealand, within our area. And that report landed some years ago, and I'm sure your listeners are going, why hasn't anything happened? Well, when I got to council, that was my first question, and I was pleased to see that in the background there was work happening, but in my view, it was a little bit slow, and we've pushed as hard as we can, and I think the council have ended up doing quite a good job. So they commissioned a report that took into consideration the work done locally, and then came up with a bunch of actions that our council can take to help make housing more accessible and affordable.
Could you summarise what that report listed as a possible work program for the council?
Well, we have to investigate increasing the supply of public housing, because we've got a very small amount if you look at other regions per population. We've also got to increase the quality of existing public housing, but we've got to also take up existing development capacity. And as I think many of us know, we are having housing built that is large housing on fairly large properties, and that is not meeting the demands of smaller houses on smaller sections. We also simply just don't have enough houses built. Everything that we can do that encourages housing to be built is on the table. So we've got to increase existing development capacity, and we've also got to make emergency and transitional housing available.
So basically, the path that is outlined is much more activist than it has been in the past.
Yeah, I think that's a very active way of describing it. From an outsider's point of view, I think our council saw its role as an advocacy role and providing housing for seniors. With the new councillors that are there, the pressure that has been brought by public campaigns, of which I was involved in some, and you were involved in some, I think our elected members and our council are really aware of the hardship and suffering that exists in our community, and it's been getting worse. I was one of those people, should I say our family, we had taken a boy during the last general election who had lost their home, and the idea that you can have a boy trying to go to secondary school and doesn't have a home over its head was just appalling to me. And the more you get into the community, the more you meet people outside your social circle, the more you see that demand. And it's not that they don't want a home or can't pay for a home, there just aren't enough homes being built that are affordable. So I think our council is really taking a much more proactive stance, and we're going to do whatever we can.
Well,
and this sort of leads us into where we are now, which is the council's had a briefing on the type of money that would be involved to kickstart this program. And then this Thursday, and that led to them accepting that we need to put that into the annual plan. And then now this week, if we actually, if council meeting can go ahead, then the councillors will be accepting, hopefully, a number of recommendations that start this work plan and just reaffirm that funding, if it becomes available, will make the work program possible.
All right. Now, thank you very much for that. I feel much better. However, you've mentioned COVID-19, and you're aware I've advocated to the council in terms of COVID-19 and the seriousness that it poses to our community and to our capacity to pay, and there are very real concerns. It's just so unfortunate that this report, which incidentally is dated October of last year, only emerges now, and it's likely to be almost a sideshow when I believe, and I'm sure you believe, this should be a really important consideration for our community. That being said, the money that has been proposed, is this the $200,000 increase in the operating budget to increase the council's capacity to deliver? Is that the money that you're talking about in the first instance?
Yeah, so there's two parts. There's CapEx and OpEx. So there's $2 million for capital, and that allows us to purchase land and get in the role of making sure that that land is available for houses that we're talking about to be built. And then there's also $200,000 to ensure that the program can get off the work, can get going. So right now, when we're looking at COVID-19, there's almost no one in council who can progress this work at all.
Yes.
I'm a fairly proactive person, and I wanted to make sure that this information was publicly disseminated and that we were talking about it. But we have to acknowledge that there's only so much information that council can pump out at any one time. And the most important thing is getting people to understand that they actually need to stay home, they need to wash, they need to look after themselves, and they need to look at certain communication channels so that we can stay calm in this country and try and get ahead of the COVID-19 virus. So, yeah, it is absolutely terrible timing in terms of the importance, but I think councillors will understand that we need to continue with this, but at the same time, much of council work is going to have to be refocused on focusing on dealing with COVID-19, because, you know, when we stand back, we often don't see what the council's doing. They have to have in place a position where people who would not normally be able to go to work can deal with the pipes and the sewerage and all of those things we don't often see. And how are we going to deal with that if people get sick? So the council's working on significant issues like that go right across our infrastructure. And I have to go, well, I know my focus is housing, but that's actually more important, as long as we don't just use this as an excuse to go, right, we're not going to do it. Because as I started off saying, if we don't have houses over our head, and if we've got people crowding into garages and living rooms, which we currently have, that is how we help to spread things like the virus.
Rob, let's just talk about the practicalities here. What we're talking about is the council investigating a wider role in housing, and that work was given a timeline starting early last year, finishing early 2021. In order to feed into the long-term plan. Do you think that early 2021 is realistic and achievable given the current circumstances?
Look, I don't think anyone can gaze into the future and think we know what's going to happen. The Prime Minister's clearly laid out a series of levels of where different things are going to happen in New Zealand. Commentators are pushing that we move more quickly to higher levels. And if that happens, there is going to be no work that progresses on the housing program. But at the same time, once we get through a certain level of this, people will be able to work from home and start to make decisions. But look, the short answer is I don't think the timeframes that we were proposing before COVID-19 will be achievable now. But I do think we still need to start.
Right. And at least we've got the place marker now. And the place it begins is Thursday. And I investigated the possibility of people making public submissions to this. The Mayor was telling me that people can make submissions in the general public speaking time, but one at a time. So they'll be outside. They won't be in the council chamber. They'll be admitted one at a time. So it is possible to make restricted public submissions on this if you think that this is an important issue, as I suspect both people in this conversation think.
And I think to add to that, one of the things that we were proposing was a much larger engagement plan around this.
Yes.
That now has to be folded into the annual plan engagement. So it won't be the only opportunity that people have to feed into this. And as you are so correctly stating, it'll be one person at a time in council chambers so that we can make sure that there is a safe environment for everyone.
Excellent. Rob, thank you so much for joining us. Much appreciated. No doubt we'll talk again, and I'd like to talk about social welfare at some stage as well, because that is getting to be pretty top of mind as well in our interesting world.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you.
And thank you so much for taking the time to chat, and to all your listeners, stay safe out there and just look after one another.
Rob McCann, I thank you. There we are. That is KCDC Councillor Rob McCann.
106.3 Beach FM.